he's not just a former president. He's a defeated former president. Defeated by a margin of over 7 million of your votes.
Today, of course, marks the 1-year anniversary of the January 6th Capitol riots, the very riots that were incited by former President Donald Trump. And you just heard from President Joe Biden giving a speech, of course, on this 1-year anniversary, but more importantly, for the first time, really calling out Donald Trump and the incitements that he engaged in, which of course led up to the Capitol riots. Now, we have other snippets from his speech. He did get a lot of admiration, a lot of applause for it, because Joe Biden isn't really known for tough rhetoric, unless he's talking about corn pop, of course. But here he is addressing Donald Trump and the Capitol rioters.
There is simply zero proof the election results were inaccurate. In fact, in every venue where evidence had to be produced, an oath to tell the truth had to be taken, the former president failed to make his case. Just think about this. The former president and his supporters have never been able to explain how they accept as accurate the other election results that took place on November 3rd. The elections for governor, United States Senate, House of Representatives. Elections which they closed the gap in the House. They challenged none of that. President's name was first. Then we went down the line. Governors, senators, House of Representatives. Somehow those results are accurate on the same ballot. But the presidential race was flawed. And on the same ballot, the same day, cast by the same voters. The only difference, the former president didn't lose those races. He just lost the one that was his own.
Now, obviously, I agree with what President Biden says there. I think that the point he made in regard to the Republican wins on the same ballots that do not go contested by Trump supporters happen to be pretty fascinating, especially when on the same ballot they'll complain that there was voter fraud pertaining to the presidential election. So I like what he says there, but the big problem that I have, John, is while rhetorically speaking, Biden is saying the right things, what really matters is what kinds of actions the Biden administration and the whole of the Democratic Party take to prevent the erosion of what's left of our democratic process.
Yeah, you're right, substantively. I do have one criticism even before we get to what you just said, which is more important, admittedly. Rhetorically, the points he's making are indisputable. And in the previous clip, I like that he's being aggressive. I wish that he could deploy that against literally anyone other than Donald Trump, or as you said, corn pop. But that's not gonna happen. Maybe a speech or two like that about Kyrsten Sinema could have moved the needle, could have done something, but we'll never know because he's not gonna do it. His rhetoric in terms of how he explained a very good point about their lack of issue with all of the other down ballot races was undercut a little bit by the fact that it was like the worst possible delivery of it. But it's a great point, and they don't dispute those. Some of the most like out front people like Marjorie Greene, who literally will not stop talking about how the election was stolen. She is from one of the states. She got elected on that. But again, it's that point being made by Biden is like, I would put it in the same rhetorical category of like 80% of what I say on my show. It's like what I think of is indisputably true and should make sense in a rational world, but it's being broadcast in a different world than a rational one. They're not going to answer what Biden said. It's a great gotcha point that they will never be got by. But the other point though is, should he be making those points? They're true. But I don't know, there's something about the president speaking on the anniversary of January 6th and going, not just denying that the election was stolen or declaring that no rational person believes it, but kind of delving into the minutia of it, to me, sort of like by necessity reopens it as a conversation. Like I worry that seems defensive almost. It makes it seem as if this is a debate that we can have politically when there is obviously no debate to be had there.
I don't think there is any speech that Joe Biden would have given today that would have been good. I know that's, and look.
You get called a Joe Biden fan online.
It's going to reinforce what some, Dem apologists think about me, which is there's nothing Biden can do that'll make you happy, which is not true. That's not true. A speech is just a speech, right? So sure, we can nitpick, we can say that he's, making points that are demonstrably true, but unfortunately attempt to, or create an opportunity to like relitigate something that's already pretty clear. I think that's a valid criticism. I don't know what else he would say though. Like what else would his speech be? Like to me, the president speaking on this day is really not that important. To me, going back to what I said earlier, the most important thing is what kind of actions are being taken by the Democratic Party to, in the very least, mitigate the damage that's being done, not just on January 6th, but more importantly, everything that's transpired following January 6th. Yeah. So I want to go to one more Biden clip, and then I'll give you some more details in regard to what I'm talking about, because it's not just about the insurrectionists. It's not just about the riots on that day. It's about what has been done legislatively on a state level to erode our democratic process. Let's go to the last clip.
Finally, the third big lie being told by a former president and his supporters is that the mob who sought to impose their will through violence are the nation's true patriots. Is that what you thought when you looked at the mob ransacking the Capitol, destroying property, literally defecating in the hallways, rifling through the desks of senators and representatives, hunting down members of Congress? Patriots? Not in my view.
I like that part of his speech a lot. And I don't know if people agree with me on it, but I think that him mentioning the fact that these rioters defecated in the Capitol like that, it gives you, it's gross, obviously, but it gives you the imagery that you need to have when it comes to these people who did what they did that day. Because there really has not been a robust counter by Democrats, especially not by Joe Biden, to the narratives that we've been hearing from the Republican Party. Remember, they keep trying to paint these individuals as patriots, or they try to paint these individuals as tourists, like peaceful demonstrators, peaceful tourists, like nothing serious, nothing to be worried about. Of course, they also provide a buffet of other narratives if you're not buying that, right? Oh, it was actually the FBI, and we'll get to all of those other narratives later in the show. Yeah. But I like the fact that Biden said something in the context of this speech that gave people a real visual of what these people were doing, right? Aside from the clear violence. Yeah, they're crapping all over the floor. They're crapping on desks. Like this is something, these are not patriots. These are not people who are in a healthy state of mind, to say the least. Now, real quick, going back to what I was saying earlier about what has transpired following January 6th. Later in his speech, Joe Biden talks about how we have overcome, the election was certified, almost making it appear as though there's been a great victory in the name of democracy. But things have actually devolved considerably. So for instance, let's go to this headline from US News and World Report. Republican-led state legislatures passed dozens of restrictive voting laws in 2021. States with Republican legislatures have passed waves of new laws, making it harder for constituents to vote in response to the 2020 election, experts say. And we've covered various states in quite a bit of detail with what they're doing to make it increasingly difficult for people to vote, particularly, voters who happen to be Black, people who typically do not have, like, let's say, a state ID because they're out of state students, or don't drive a car and use public transportation. I mean, all sorts of restrictive laws. And there needs to be a robust response to that legislatively. And John, what would that robust legislative response be on a federal level?
I don't know, it probably would look like one of multiple pieces of legislation of varying degrees of quality that have been there waiting to be passed since Biden was inaugurated. And not only have they not done it, but they've barely even seemed like they wanted to. We can at least point to the reconciliation bill and say there was some robust debate for a period. But with the voting rights bill, it's they deferred to Manchin. Manchin was going to go find some Republicans. He swore he'd be able to do it. Obviously, he couldn't because that's ridiculous. And they gradually chopped away bits of it, producing weaker and weaker pieces of legislation. And now they're once again putting the football out there and saying that that's going to be sort of their priority for the rest of January. Well, I really hope that that's true, and we'll be waiting to see. But it's all been there from the very beginning.
I have not seen a real fight for voting rights. And as we know, in order to pass any legislation, you would need to either reform or do away with the legislative filibuster in the Senate, which currently requires 60 senators, which means you would need 10 Republican senators to vote in favor of any bill for it to pass. And Biden, especially in the context of social spending legislation, wants to maintain the filibuster. Some argue, well, he wants a carve out for voting rights. I don't see him fighting for it. Anyone can say they want anything, but the proof is in the pudding. Actions speak louder than words. And I just have not seen that from the Biden administration. Also, more than 40% in the US do not believe that Joe Biden legitimately won the election. This is according to an Axios poll. And it's one of many. We've shown you so many polls indicating that a huge portion of Americans, particularly those on the right, do not believe that Biden won the election. They believe it was stolen by Donald Trump. So this is what I'm talking about when I say that it has not been this massive victory for the Democratic Party or for the country or for our democratic process. Things have continued to devolve, and I worry that Biden is completely disconnected or delusional about it.
100%. Yeah, it's clear. And look, it's the sort of thing, it should be like the issue that, regardless of what any elected Democrat in a position of power thinks about any other individual piece of legislation or like a conversation about immigration reform or whatever, you obviously have to secure your ability to get elected. And they know what's being done. They know what's being done in terms of voter suppression with the pieces of legislation being passed at the state level that you just talked about on TDR this morning. We talked about the secretaries of state elections where big lie Republicans are running to take over virtually every swing state in the country. And if they have any urgency about this, they're not showing it. And the only advice they seem to have for anyone not in a position of power is just out-organize it. Yeah, out-organize not only the baked-in decades of voter suppression that were already there long before Donald Trump. There was already gerrymandering. There was already inequitable distribution of polling places and all that. That already existed. Then they did it during the Trump years, and then they've done it even worse since then. The Democrats lost the 2016 election. How much extra organization do they think is just sitting out there on the road waiting to be picked up? It's ridiculous, and it's insulting to the people who actually do that organizing as a full-time job. They have a job too. The elected officials have a job too, and they should start doing at least some version of it.
That's exactly right. Passing off all the hard work to organizers is ridiculous.